Today we're going to give a brief tutorial on resumes and cover letters. Resumes and cover letters are often the first impression a prospective employer will get of an interested job candidate. These documents help you present yourself as a qualified candidate for the job and get you one step closer to getting an interview. But in order to have a better chance at getting an interview, these documents need to be clean, concise, free of errors, and really emphasize your relatable experience and skills for the job. Today, we'll discuss some tips for how to ensure your resume and cover letter are ready for submission. And first, we'll start with resumes. At minimum, there are a few components that need to be included in all resumes. First, you need to include your identifying information. This includes your name, credentials, location, and contact information, such as a phone number and an email address. Your resume should also include your work or professional experience, including any licensure or certification information. This is done by listing the name of the employer or organization, your job title, location, and a brief description of your duties and responsibilities. This experience should typically be listed in reverse chronological order, so your current or most recent experience on the top and your older experience listed below. It's typically listed in bullet point format, but could be in paragraph format as long as it's easy to read and has short sentences. Your duties and responsibilities should include action verbs to describe your experience, which we'll touch on a bit more later. And this is also a good place to include your internship experience. You also should include your education, including the name of your institution, location, degree, major, and the date of completion or anticipated date of graduation. If you don't have a lot of work or professional experience yet, this can be a good place to highlight any courses that may be relevant to the job that you're applying for. There are also some components of a resume that are optional or can be altered to best fit your needs and previous experience. For example, some people like to include an objective or summary of their qualifications, which highlight why they are interested and would be a good fit for the job. If you do choose to include a section like this, make sure it's brief and relevant to the specific position that you're applying for. It's also common to include at least one more section that highlights additional information about you and your experience. This could include skills, professional accomplishments, awards, publications, presentations, volunteer experience, or anything else that you feel would be relevant to the position you're applying for or would help you stand out from the rest of the applicants. And lastly, it's important to note that resumes for governmental positions, especially for federal agencies, often have different formatting requirements and require specific information in your resume to ensure that you're meeting the qualifications and requirements listed in the job announcement. So if you are applying to a federal agency, please make sure you review the requirements and include all necessary information. So now on to some tips for a good resume. Resumes should be well organized with easy-to-read headings. Prospective employers don't have much time to review resumes in detail, so you want to make sure to include the most important information without being too wordy or having a layout that is too busy. It's important to use common fonts and a readable font size, typically between 11 and 12-point font size for normal text and slightly larger font size for headings. For those just starting out in their professional careers without having much experience, resumes should typically be kept to one page. However, for people with a master's degree and/or several years of work experience, 2 pages is typically acceptable. As you get more years of experience, it's still important to keep your resume concise by focusing on including details about the most relevant experiences. While it's still useful to list most of your work experiences, you don't need to include as much detail about the experiences that are not as relevant. Recently, there has also been a push for ATS-compliant resumes. ATS, or Applicant Tracking System, is a software used by organizations to help with the hiring process. The system will scan your resume to look for information relevant to the job posting, such as your job titles, educational background, and skills, as well as looking for keywords from the job posting. This means that sometimes your resume may not even get to a person for their review if it doesn't make it through the automated review first. There are many tips out there for creating an ATS compliant resume, some of which includes using an ATS resume template, labeling sections clearly, and applying keyword optimization. If you're interested in learning more about ATS compliant resumes, a quick Google search will pull up numerous tips, resources, and articles. While not all hiring organizations use a system like this, it is becoming a more common practice and is something to keep in mind as you create your resume. It's also important to use action verbs to describe your experience. Action verbs are descriptive, powerful, and can help grab the attention of the reader. There are numerous resources available online that have lists of action verbs that can be helpful to use in your resume. You should also make sure that your resume is results-oriented, which helps show your accomplishments and measurements of success. This can also help you stand out among other resumes. For example, let's say you put this task on your resume, worked with partners on a new community outreach program. This doesn't show much of what you did or what the results were of this program. Instead, you could start off with a stronger action verb and also include more detail and results. So instead, it could say something like, collaborated with healthcare partners to create and implement an immunization awareness program, leading to a 10% increase in immunizations. That's a much stronger statement and will provide the resume reviewer with helpful information about the type of work you can do and the outcome of that work. In addition to any technical skills you've gained in past experiences, you'll also want to include adaptive skills. Often seen as soft skills, adaptive skills such as effective communication and problem solving are important for any position. Adaptive skills are transferable and can be used in any job regardless of the title or field. Even if you don't have specific experience to the position you're applying for, think about some of these adaptive, transferable skills that you've gained from your experience, such as verbal and written communication, problem solving, decision making, organization, and conflict management and resolution, among many others. When working on your resume, it's also important to avoid common mistakes. A lot of common mistakes can be easily avoided by proofreading and having others proofread your resume before sending it to prospective employers. Don't use lots of text or paragraphs when writing your resume. Usually, clear, concise bullet points are best. It's also important that you don't over-exaggerate your accomplishments or experience. For example, if you were part of a team effort, it can be useful to indicate that in your resume and what your specific contribution was to the effort. Additionally, you don't want to make yourself sound like an expert at something when really you've only had a little experience with it. Make sure to avoid typos and using first-person language such as I or my. And lastly, don't use a distracting format or layout. This will take away from the points you are trying to get across in your resume. If you aren't sure where to start with creating a resume, there are a lot of great template options available online that you can use and tailor to fit your needs so that you aren't starting from scratch. For example, Indeed has a resume builder that allows you to choose a template that you like. This template can be customized by style and sections that you'd like to include in your resume. Being able to customize the sections can save you some time by not having to create all of the sections on your own. You can then easily input your information in the highlighted areas, and once you're done, you can download the resume. Microsoft Word also has multiple templates available, including a variety of style and layout options. Lastly, Canva is another option for resume templates. Their online resume builder is free, easy to use, and extremely customizable. These are three of the more common online resume templates and builders, but there are many other options out there which you can find by Googling free resume templates. So in summary, resumes should be easy to read, concise, and highlight your contributions, skills, and accomplishments to present yourself as a strong candidate. Another way to further expand on your skills, strengths, and experiences is through a cover letter. Cover letters are not always required when applying for a job, but make sure to check the job description to see if they are required and if any specific information needs to be included in the letter. This image shows a great overview of a cover letter format. You start with the date and your contact information at the top, Then you'll include recipient information and a salutation or greeting, an opening paragraph, middle or body paragraphs, a closing paragraph, and then you'll end it with a complimentary close and your signature. We'll review each of these sections in more detail next. At the top of your cover letter, you'll include your identifying information, such as your name and contact information. This can be copied over from your resume and kept in a similar format to keep consistent between the two documents. You'll also include the recipient information, so who is this letter being sent to? This typically includes the name of the hiring organization and their address. Next, you'll want to make sure you address your cover letter using a professional greeting salutation. If you know the name of the hiring manager, make sure to address the letter to that individual. If not, you could say something like, "Dear hiring manager," or "Dear hiring team." You should try to avoid using "to whom it may concern" when possible, since that is more vague. You'll then get into the intro paragraph. This is a good spot to introduce yourself, state the position that you're applying to, and briefly describe what makes you a good fit. If you're applying to multiple positions at once, be sure to use the correct position title. Next, you'll get to the body or middle paragraphs. This is where you'll want to describe how your experience, skills, and qualifications will benefit the organization and make you a good fit for the position. You should always make sure to read the job description and try to include any relevant experience or keywords from the job description. Even if your experience isn't public health or health related, there are still many transferable or adaptive skills, as we mentioned in the resume section, that you can talk about in this section that may still be relevant to the job, such as communication, organization, problem solving, decision making, among many others. For example, working with teams and working across sectors is a common skill that is required in public health related positions. So if you've done this in a different type of setting, it can still be relevant to talk about in a cover letter. This is also a good place to provide an example, especially something that you want to highlight in depth from your resume that relates well to the job and your previous experience. In the closing paragraph, you'll want to reiterate your interest and fit for the organization. You can even relate it back to the organization's mission, which also shows that you've taken the time to research the organization. You can provide your contact information here and let the hiring manager or team know the best way to reach you. And lastly, you'll want to thank the reviewer for their time and consideration of your application. You'll then end the cover letter with some type of professional closing salutation, such as "sincerely," "best regards," or "respectfully," and then sign your name. So how can you make sure that you have a good cover letter? Well, you can start by making sure it's only one page long. Employers don't have time to read multiple pages for each person applying, so you want to make sure to keep it limited to one page. It should also be addressed to the correct person and include the job or organization-specific information. Even if you have a template you're using, always make sure to double-check that you've included the correct information for the job. Make sure to use professional language, which means no contractions or jargon. As previously mentioned, make sure to back up your skills and qualifications with examples that relate to the job you're applying to. It's also important to distinguish between what you did versus what the team did. This helps to make sure that you're getting credit for your contribution, but not taking all the credit for something you did as a team. This can also help show that you are able to work independently, but as part of a team as well. And lastly, it's important to tailor and customize the cover letter to the position and organization you're applying to. This shows that you read the job description, did your research on the organization, and can show how your skills and experience directly relate to the specific job and organization that you're applying to. There are some easy ways to avoid common mistakes as well. Similar to with resumes, it's important to always check for spelling and grammar errors. Even one small error can lead to a rejection of your application because it shows you didn't take the time to review and polish it before sending. So always make sure to proofread and have others proofread before you send it out. You also don't want to regurgitate what you already have written on your resume or include irrelevant information. You can and should expand on the relevant information from your resume by including examples, but you don't need to relist everything from your resume. And lastly, if you're applying to multiple jobs across multiple companies, always make sure to double check that you're addressing the letter to the correct organization and including information about the correct job opening. Writing cover letters can be time consuming and it can be easy to copy and paste from past cover letters, but addressing a letter to the incorrect organization will quickly get your application removed from the candidate pool. So, in summary, resumes and cover letters are great ways to introduce yourself to prospective employers and highlight your experience and qualifications for a job. For more information, check out our Employment Resources one-pager that can be found on our website at rvphtc.org/resources. This document highlights additional resources on creating a resume, cover letter, and more. Hopefully, this tutorial helped provide you with some tips and information to think about when developing your resumes and cover letters.